Welcome to The Sideshow.
Okay, welcome to another edition of The Sideshow. Got a great episode for you today, a great conversation about a great band. Mike is going to be taking the lead. Mike, why don't you let the audience know what we're going to be going through today?
Thanks, Mark. For me, this is a big one today. This is aside from an album that is like one of my top 10 favorite albums ever, and we're going to talk today about King Crimson, Discipline, Side 1, from 1981. And King Crimson is one of my favorite bands, one of the more interesting bands from the rock era, definitely in the progressive rock genre, basically from their initial album back in 1969 through basically the present day. There's still a version of King Crimson that was touring not that long ago. Mm-hmm. Within the last 10 years, I've seen a collection of like former members of King Crimson perform. So they've been from 1969 through the very recent past. They've been on the radar screen, and there's actually been a band that's toured within the last year and may still be together to some extent that's referred to as Beat, mm-hmm. which contains some former members of King Crimson, including two of the members of the band at the time that this album was recorded, Tony Levin and Adrian Belew. Mm-hmm. But King Crimson, the history of King Crimson would be something for an entire podcast. Yeah. So there's, we're not going to be able to kind of delve into the intricacies of the history of King Crimson. But just kind of briefly, they sort of made a big splash right out of the gate in 1969 when they released their first album, which was called In the Court of the Crimson King. And I didn't bring a copy of the record or whatever for the first album, but it's got a very distinctive front cover. It's an image of a face, and you can't tell whether it's fear or anger, but it's a very striking image. Yeah. And it had a style of music that was when progressive rock was still in its relatively early stages. The Moody Blues had come out a little earlier in the 60s using a device, an instrument called a mellotron, mm-hmm. which was a keyboard type instrument, and it had I think it was actually on tape. I don't know. I don't want to talk out of school, but the mellotron could sort of artificially create the sound of strings, and sometimes the sound of choral voices and this and that. It had a unique sound. The Moody Blues came out. That I believe Nights in White Satin had some mellotron on it, but it was a big part of In the Court of the Crimson King, the mellotron. Robert Fripp played lead guitar in the original incarnation. Greg Lake played bass. Greg Lake, later of Emerson, Lake, and Palmer fame. The drummer was a man named Michael Giles. And the fourth member of the band at that time was a man named Ian McDonald. And he played keyboards. He also played some woodwind instruments, saxophone, flute, and whatnot. And he eventually went on and became one of the original members of the band Foreigner from the late 70s, early 80s. So some accomplished musicians in the band. The first album was most known for a song called 21st Century Schizoid Man, which was a heavy metal-ish, sort of frenetic jam, very guitar-oriented, but with some saxophone in there, very tight playing, not really like anything that had come out at that time. And then they had another. That was the first track on the album. The closing track was "In the Court of the Crimson King," the title track, and that was a Mellotron heavy piece. That if you listen to classic rock radio and they say, "Hey, here's a deep cut from 1969," you might hear it every now and again. And this incarnation of King Crimson didn't last. I think Michael Giles and Ian McDonald, they didn't return, or they left. They were no longer members of the band after that first album. Greg Lake hung around to sing some on their second album called "In the Wake of Poseidon," and their third album, by this point it's 1970 or so, called "Lizard." And Robert Fripp was the only member of the original band that was still around within just a couple of years of their formation.
Yeah.
And then their fourth album, which I believe came out in 1971, it was called "Islands." And by that point, there was a whole new band from the previous record. And one of the members of the band at the time of their fourth album was Boz Burrell. And this was pre-Bad Company. Boz Burrell was the bass player for Bad Company. And he learned bass to become a member of King Crimson for their recording their fourth album called "Islands." And then the band basically fell apart after the album "Islands." But eventually, around 1972, later in 1972, Robert Fripp started a new version, so to speak, of King Crimson. And the members of that band included Bill Bruford, who had been the drummer for the band Yes. He drummed with Yes from their, on their initial albums, and as well as the Yes album, Fragile, Close to the Edge. And he left the band in between Close to the Edge and Tales from Topographic Oceans, like when Yes Songs was being recorded. And he left Yes to become a member of the new version of King Crimson. Also a bass player named John Wetton, and he had played bass in a number of bands, not quite as well known as Yes. And then there were a couple of other members, a man named David Cross, who played violin and some keyboards, and then a percussionist named Jamie Muir. And that version of the band produced its first album, which was called Lark's Tongue in Aspic. Had a very different feel and sound to it compared to the previous incarnations of the band, although it was definitely in the progressive vein. Jamie Muir was a percussionist. And he ended up leaving the band after that album. They recorded another album after that called Starless and Bible Black, which contained some studio material, but also some live material with the audience sounds removed. So it didn't necessarily sound like a live album from a number of different concerts. There were some concerts, a concert in Amsterdam, Glasgow, Scotland, and maybe some other places that were used for that album. And then they produced a third album called Red. And by that point, David Cross, the violinist, had left. So, and that turned out to be the last studio album from that incarnation of the band. A live album that was recorded in the United States during a tour in either 1973 or 1974 was released maybe around 1975, called USA. And that was the four-member, Robert Fripp, Bill Bruford, John Wetton, and David Cross. And that was basically the end of that incarnation of the band. And so we basically got 7 studio albums from the band. And the lineup of the band had not been the same on any of them. You had 8 different versions, or 7 different lineups for 7 different albums. And Robert Fripp made Robert Fripp was the only constant up to that point.
Yeah.
In the band.
Kind of. This is Robert Fripp's band.
And
King Crimson is Robert Fripp's band.
It's Robert Fripp. It's Robert Fripp's band, but King Crimson never worked unless it was a collaborative effort.
Yes.
I mean, he may have been, sort of the kingpin or the whatever you want to call it, the leader of the band. But it was the people that he was playing with, particularly in the second version with Bill Bruford and John Wetton, and then through the next version, which we're going to be taking up in a minute here when we talk about, because their next album was Discipline that we're going to be talking about today. But after the dissolution of this sort of early 70s version of King Crimson, Robert Fripp made some fairly unambiguous statements that, no, King Crimson is done.
Mm-hmm.
And Robert Fripp, then he put out a number of solo albums. He also formed a band called the League of Gentlemen, which I believe was based out of New York City and was kind of disco-fied new wave with a Robert Fripp bent to it. Mm-hmm. They put out an album that I own. I haven't listened to it in a long time. So Robert Fripp was doing stuff. Mm-hmm. And he did some collaboration with Brian Eno, who we've referred to in some other podcasts, who was a producer later in his career, primarily, more so than a musician. But so Robert Fripp is doing this and that. Well, in any case, he ended up putting another band together, and the band was going to be called Discipline. Mm-hmm. And one of the members was Bill Bruford, who had played in King Crimson during kind of during the second phase, King Crimson 2.0. Yeah. And also a bass player, Tony Levin, who Robert Fripp had met when he was working, I think, as a producer for Peter Gabriel's second solo album.
Yeah.
He played guitar on that album. He was the producer. And Tony Levin played some bass on that album. So he met Tony Levin. So we've got Robert Fripp, Bill Bruford, Tony Levin, and then the fourth and final member of this band that, when it was originally kind of thrown together, was called Discipline, was Adrian Belew. And he had made a name for himself. Initially, Frank Zappa was, Adrian Belew caught Frank Zappa's attention, and Adrian Belew was playing in Zappa's band. Like around the time of the Chic Yer Booty album, Adrian Belew plays on that. Interesting guitar player, was able to get unique sound out of an electric guitar.
Yeah.
And when David Bowie was going to go on tour after the Heroes album, which came out, and I believe it's 1977, Robert Fripp played lead guitar on the Heroes album. And Robert Fripp did not want to go out on the road touring with David Bowie. I mean, nothing. There was no bad blood between the two. He didn't want to go out on tour, like on some major rock tour.
That's a big endeavor.
And so they were looking for they were auditioning guitarists to fill in, to play guitar on David Bowie's post Heroes tour, and Adrian Belew auditioned, and this is the guy.
They liked it.
They liked it. And so Robert Fripp, that's how Robert Fripp, as far as I'm aware, met Adrian Belew. So Adrian Belew became the fourth member of this band called Discipline. And they were working on the sort of material that, we're going to be talking about in a little bit here that actually appeared on the Discipline album. But at some point, after these four guys started playing together, Robert Fripp just determined, this is King Crimson. This is the next generation of King Crimson. And so the King Crimson moniker was resurrected, and they started working on this album in earnest. So that's kind of the short, and I've been talking for a little while, but that is the short version of King Crimson up to this point.
Well, they obviously, you pointed out, these lineup changes that were album after album after album, all with different lineups. I mean, you tend to see that for one of two reasons. The first be, and again, I pointed out this is Robert Fripp's band. Not that he's not the guy that says I'm going to write all the songs and I'm going to. That's not how he works. But it's still, he's calling a lot of the shots, right? It's his band, and if a band is going to be going in all kinds of different directions, that can put off band members, right? I didn't sign up to be an R&B band. I didn't sign up to be a progressive rock band. I wanted to play whatever it might be. King Crimson has done a lot of different kinds of stuff. They have a King Crimson sound, but it is hard to nail them down with what they're doing. And you can see maybe some people would be frustrated this is not the kind of music that I want to play. Okay. The other reason is the guy in charge is an asshole. Right, or hard to work with. Now, I don't know Robert Fripp, so I can't sit here and say that was the deal with him. But it's kind of likely that was a part of it. That he might not have been the easiest person to work with. He's as we'll talk about. There's some very intricate. He's a skilled musician. He's a skilled producer type role. He knows what he wants, and I imagine he was very demanding as a person to work with. So that might have had something to work with it as well. But this isn't the type of music that you can just sit in your garage and after the third take say we've got it, right? This is, as we'll hear and as we'll talk about, this is some very complex music that we're going with, and I can understand how someone leading that type of band would be incredibly demanding. So that could have been a factor as well. Regardless of what it was, we didn't see a lot of stability in King Crimson. I believe their lineup stayed with this lineup for a couple albums. Once they got this discipline / we're going to call this King Crimson now, they had a short period of stability in that lineup there. But the underlying thing of it was Robert Fripp. He has a particular style. He's kind of a weird guy when you listen to some of the music that he was associated with, but really an interesting musician is really what it comes down to, with a lot of history in the industry.
And this sort of dichotomy between kind of the clear not front person, but the leader of the band, and the fact that when Robert Fripp was playing his best music, it was usually in collaboration with others.
Yes.
And in King Crimson, that being collaboration with the other members of the band. But then, he played music for, David Bowie, Peter Gabriel, and whatnot. Some fairly heavy hitters, English musicians who made some pretty significant mark on the music industry at a mass popularity level. Mm-hmm. And King Crimson never had that mass popularity. They kind of retained, and in some ways I think it sort of adds to the allure of King Crimson. They kind of maintained their status as more of a cult band than a band that achieved popular success in the true sense. A lot of respect, I think, from a lot of other musicians, not all, but a lot of other musicians.
Well, I think that there's that again, it kind of looks at what slice of the pie of the music industry are you talking about. I read an article, years ago, maybe 15, 20 years ago, an article talking about, it wasn't really, the article itself wasn't focused on King Crimson, but it was talking about what happened to music in the 80s. And if you were going to chase the money in the 80s, that meant MTV, hairband type. I mean, that's where you, if if that was your goal, was to maximize the dollar coming out in popular music, in commercial success, that is where you went. This article was saying we have to thank a couple bands that decided they weren't going to do that, even though they had the industry oomph to get the production, to get the record labels and that type of thing. And one of the bands that they mentioned was King Crimson, right? They kept chugging away at the type of, at a progressive type rock to keep just, this kind of variety of sound and mix going and alive, which eventually landed us into bands like Soundgarden and Pearl Jam in when we got into kind of the grunge phase, which just seemed very different in a number of ways from these MTV hair bands that were so popular in the 80s. So just kind of an interesting, I still recall that, that article saying we've got to thank some bands that set the money aside and said we're going to play this, play this type of music to keep more thoughtful, intelligent, and complex, rock music in the mix. And that's certainly what they did here. And also one more thing about that, we went to see King Crimson. You brought me along. You were always a bigger King Crimson fan than I was, although I've always enjoyed him. But we went and saw him in Milwaukee, I think it was. And one of the things that I noticed was it's very clear that Robert Fripp is not out there seeking and crawling for the attention. One of the reasons was shown in that concert, because at first I couldn't even see him on the stage. And you had to point out that he was sitting on the back of the stage, like behind the drummer almost, right? Just kind of in a chair playing the guitar, not drawing a lot. And Adrian Belew was getting the attention as the lead singer, and Tony Levin was out front. But just I thought that was kind of interesting. He clearly wasn't in this for all the clapping and applause and the popular attention that you get. So very interesting what he was trying to work for and strive for in this music.
The one thing about Robert Fripp is he is not a rock and roller.
Mm-hmm.
He isn't. Now Robert Fripp can play some of the loudest, fiercest, just in your face guitar sound of just in pure ferociousness.
Yeah.
He can play electric guitar to stand up against any of the biggest, meanest heavy metal guitar players. But in real life, he's probably kind of a nerd, kind of like a brainiac type nerd, who he just, as far as going out and sex and drugs and rock and roll and wine, women and song, and he's not into it. Although he did marry a British performer named Toyah Willcox, who is this kind of flamboyantly sexy, buxom woman, and they do videos together now, like from their kitchen, with Robert Fripp playing loud heavy metal on a Les Paul guitar and her bopping around singing in their kitchen.
Mm-hmm.
So but Robert Fripp's devotion was to the music and not to a lifestyle or anything like that. And it was all about the music. So
yeah.
In any case, so and second, that concert we saw, which I remember very well, that was in 1995. So that was 30 years ago. Yeah. And that was at the Riverside Theater in Milwaukee. It was a great concert. The last time I saw the kind of reconfigured King Crimson about 10 years ago was at the Riverside Theater in Milwaukee. But that was a fabulous concert. And as you may recall, pretty loud and intense.
Yes.
And that was the fourth incarnation of King Crimson.
Yeah.
Which was referred to as the double trio, because there were two drummers, two bass players, and two guitarists. Adrian Belew and Robert Fripp. Bill Bruford was still around, and then a Pat Mastelotto, and then Tony Levin, and then a bass player named Trey Gunn. There's still a fifth incarnation of King Crimson that without Bill Bruford and Tony Levin that came around after that. I can't even remember the year, but it was the name of the album was The Construction of Light. So I mean, we basically had 5 different eras of King Crimson, going back to 1969, and so just a very interesting band. But for today's purposes, we're talking about King Crimson 3.0, let's say, the third incarnation, and the first album from that group was called Discipline. I've got a copy of the album. I think it's very iconic, but it's very simple graphics. I mean, you can see it. It's just a red album cover. It says King Crimson Discipline, and then it has like a Celtic Gaelic knot or whatever you want to call it. It's and then on the back, same cover. There's just the list of the songs, the list of the band members.
Yep.
Some production information, and that's it. There's nothing on the dust sleeve inside, at least not in the one that I got, which I got back then. So the album is straightforward. The album has 7 tracks on it total. 4 songs on the first side, 3 tracks on the second. We're going to be talking about the first side, and after we play some of the clips from some of these songs, people might take issue with what I'm about to say, but in some ways, this side is one of the more normal sides of music that King Crimson had come out with up to that point. I mean,
we'll revisit that after we hear a couple tracks.
But before we actually dig into the tracks, this was 1981. Since King Crimson, the previous incarnation had stopped performing and recording in like 1974. Some things had happened. One of the big ones being punk rock.
Yeah.
Disco had sort of become a
thing,
a big thing. Saturday Night Fever. Now, there'd been discos and disco music that had been around, but it became a thing with the release of the movie Saturday Night Fever in the late 70s. New wave music. We've talked about a number of different artists on our podcast about that were starting around 1978, 79.
Yeah.
Come 1980, there were a lot of albums. The Pretenders' first album came out. Talking Heads released Remain in Light. Peter Gabriel's third album. I mean, we've done podcasts about this stuff.
Yeah.
U2 came on the scene. The Police had become big.
Yeah.
And so the whole, new wave, post-punk, we recently did a podcast on XTC. So there was a lot of shit going on. And this album, I believe, it kind of took King Crimson and various aspects of it, primarily Robert Fripp's guitar, but also the pure progressive spirit and the intricate arrangements, and brought it into a context that kind of fit at the time in 1981, and was the sort of thing that some of the songs you could almost kind of dance to.
Yeah.
Which is not a hallmark of progressive rock material, at least up to that point. So, in any event, King Crimson Discipline Side 1. Now, the first track on the side is called Elephant Talk. And before we dive in farther, and this has come up I know it came up in one of our Peter Gabriel podcasts, because Tony Levin, who plays bass, and the Chapman stick instrument on this album, played both those instruments on Peter Gabriel's third album, known as Melt. But I think it's important for the listeners to get an idea of what the Chapman stick actually is. And so before we start talking about the song itself, and this is the song itself, I suppose, but we're going to take a look at a brief YouTube clip that shows Tony Levin playing a Chapman stick instrument, and he's actually doing kind of the intro to Elephant Talk, which is the first track on side one. So let's get about 20 seconds of this so that the audience and the listeners can get an idea of what the stick is, and then we'll continue after.
All right.
There we go. Yeah, well, what could be more King Crimson than that?
All right, so there you have, that's the stick, and that's what it sounds like. And for anyone who's watching, the video along with the audio of the podcast, you could see it's kind of a touch instrument. You're tapping rather than plunking or picking, and it has a sound where it can be just a bass, but you can also kind of add this stuff. And I don't want to get too deep into that. I mean, that's why, we looked at the video, but that is the Chapman stick. And now that we've kind of got that taken care of, why don't we listen to about the first minute and a half, 2 minutes of Elephant Talk, to get things going, and then we'll start our discussion in earnest on the other side.
Okay.
Same stick intro that you heard, or that from the clip of Tony Levin by himself, and then you add the drums and these sort of very interesting guitar sounds, and the song just it moves along like a dance song, but it and I'm not saying you can't dance to it, because I think you can, but it's different. It's that and one of the reasons is the use of the stick instrument.
Well, it's it's too unnerving for a lot of dance kind of feeling. Now, you can dance and jump around in a lot of ways, and certainly if you look at, dancing in, say, a punk venue, where you're kind of bouncing around, it's supposed to be aggressive and kind of agitating with what they're doing. But, this song just throws you off your balance right away from the beginning. That kind of oscillating tone going and speeding up, and finally you go into this really kind of jagged rhythm, aggressive back. I mean, it's unsettling almost, and the vocals are uneasy, and there's just some crazy sounds that are coming out of the guitar in this this music. So you can dance to it, but you'll be nervous while you're doing it.
And and that's not necessarily a bad way of describing what it was sometimes like, because the only reason I ever learned how to fast dance was because I went to some like new wave shows.
Yeah.
Like around 1980, 81. And number one, that was an environment where you could be a little more anonymous than at, the high school dance or whatever, where you're around a lot of your friends and could sort of feel a little freer to kind of try your hand or feet, as it were, at fast dancing. And one of the things that I think that this song does is, and this is something that I learned back then, is that if you're going to dance and you're going to feel like you're actually dancing, and if you're going to look for anyone who happens to be watching like you kind of know what you're doing, you don't dance with your arms and your legs. You dance with your hips. You know, if the locus of movement is in your pelvis, and I mean, and you don't need to be thrusting and obscene about it. But if it's your hips that are moving, that's how you feel like you're really dancing. And that's how you look like you're dancing, and not just kind of out there like, oh, here's the whatever the white man shuffle is, this and that. But I think that the stick line, sort of the bass line in this song, that you're able to do that with.
Yes,
you're able to do that. And so it has the music, as strange as it is. And you are right, because when that intro, it really does just kind of, it throws things out of whack to some extent. But it's just the song moves along. It's something that's sort of current, new, different, unlike anything else, but not inaccessible.
Yeah.
You need to be maybe a little adventurous in your musical.
Well, I look at inaccessible music. It's so experimental or whatever that you can't even kind of put together the rhythm and tone that's going on. You absolutely can hear. This is not some like electronic industrial experimentation that's going on with a bunch of synthesizers in weird programmatic loops. No, this is music. You've got drums and bass and guitar and vocals that are working together, right? It's written in a way. The creative mind that put this stuff together is just creating some very interesting kind of feelings and emotions that come out of it. Very complex, so much going on. Great song to listen to, like with your headphones on, to kind of check out what's going on. If you haven't listened to it before, I wouldn't recommend doing it in the dark with your headphones on, because again, it's a little unnerving. But with that, but I'd say it's very accessible music. It's just got a different type of style to it. The creativity behind this had a different thing in mind than when they wrote Obla Di Obla Da, right? Yeah. It's just they weren't going in the same direction.
Well, and you hear, and the different verses of the song basically go through, for talk, it's only talk, arguments, agreements, advice, answers, articulate, and
All A's.
Announcements, they're all A's. Well,
Yeah.
and then the next verse, talk, it's only talk. Babble, burble, banter, bicker, brouhaha.
Yeah. B.
B's. And then,
Yeah.
and they make it up to E so they can say elephant talk. But
Yeah.
it's not conventional song lyrics. It's kind of just, and which is kind of sort of consistent with the, if you listen to the whole track, it's like, I'm just spitting out words. And the words themselves, aside from the fact that they relate to talking and they start with a specific letter, A in the first verse, B in the second verse, etc. It's all just talking. It's just spewing out words that don't necessarily mean anything, which I think that's what elephant talk is supposed to be. You might as well listen to an elephant. For some of the, given what some people have to say and whatnot. I know it's not as cynical as all that. I don't think, but and Adrian Belew, you mentioned earlier, Adrian Belew was sort of tasked with being the lead vocalist and lyric writer for this incarnation of the band. Something that I don't think he was necessarily adverse to, although he may have felt under a certain amount of pressure, given the fact that Robert Fripp was a much more established figure in the music industry, and he had kind of come under his wing. Although Adrian Belew had also worked with Frank Zappa and David Bowie, and I would imagine that certainly Frank Zappa had extremely high expectations for the members of his band, and no showing up drunk, no fucking around on stage,
And he would cut you off in a heartbeat if he felt you weren't doing things the way he saw it.
And David Bowie had very high standards, I believe as well. So he was he was no novice. Yeah. But I'll tell you, and I've actually met Adrian Belew and spoken to him briefly. This would have been late 80s in Milwaukee. He had a band in between, King Crimson 3.0 and King Crimson 4.0 called the Bears. And Adrian Belew the guy plays a mean guitar.
Yeah.
He's an exceptional guitar player. But the guy is a dork. And, he's just, and he, unlike Robert Fripp, who kind of likes to keep his dorkiness in check and hide behind the guitar, Adrian is not afraid to let it all hang out, so to speak.
Let the dorkiness hang out.
Let the dorkiness hang out. And so these kind of lyrics are par for the course. Now, I shouldn't be dogging his lyrics because, on the other tracks on this side, and all three of them have sort of a unique lyrical structure that is unlike this song, and unlike the others on this side, for that matter. It's so I'm not trying to knock Adrian Belew's, but you listen to the guy, and especially and there's plenty of video that's available of this incarnation of King Crimson performing live, and a lot of it is really good.
Yeah.
They were a great live band. I saw them perform during this incarnation of the band, and I've got a lot of material on CD. King Crimson released a lot of their material on DVD audio, Blu-ray audio, surround sound, 5.1 mixes and whatnot, and also released a lot of video of this era, and this era probably they have the most video up, but all great stuff. And anyone that has the equipment and the inclination should check out the surround sound version of this album. It's worth the time. But in any case, Elephant Talk. It's a very good introduction to this incarnation of the band and this album, and really kind of sets the table. The drum sound of Bill Bruford. Not a lot of cymbals, not a lot of just traditional drumming. It's you look at stuff that was going on Talking Heads, Remain in Light, for example, sort of world music, African style drumming. Peter Gabriel was starting to introduce a lot of that kind of stuff. And you've got the Chapman Stick, which was, you didn't hear a lot of bands that used that instrument at this time, or other instrumentalists besides Tony Levin that used that instrument at this time. And Adrian Belew was kind of on the cutting edge of sort of new fashionable guitar players at this time. And Robert Fripp continued to play guitar like he did back in 1969, which is unlike anybody else in his lead guitar sound. So very good intro to this incarnation of the band, and in my opinion, one of the great album openers.
Absolutely.
So let's move on to track number 2. Which is a song called Frame by Frame. And this song it sort of has Robert Fripp and Adrian Belew sort of initially battling with each other, with two sort of different types of guitar playing. And then for the lyrics, they start to do a little bit of what eventually came to be known as their interlocking guitar style. And with the drumming and this is also Chapman Stick being played by Tony Levin rather than a conventional bass. Let's listen to some of this just to give the listeners a taste of what we're talking about, and we will continue on the other side.
All right.
What you heard there was that real fast, kind of just single note playing was Robert Fripp, and then the rhythm playing there, dun, 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 that's Adrian Belew. And so you have the two of them playing against each other, and then, the stick and the drums come in, and so you've got two very different guitar styles being played against each other. And then this Chapman Stick, which doesn't sound like a conventional bass, and then Bill Bruford sort of, playing his not conventional rock drumming. And it's so you got these 4 different things happening that aren't really consistent with each other, but they mesh well, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, it is, if you isolate them and hear one and then hear the other, you can't really picture how they'd be played together. But when they do play together, it works. It's a very interesting sound. And again, kind of a weird start, just like Elephant Talk. We start out weird here, but the pace is what catches me right away. I mean, you can picture, this is like On the Run from Pink Floyd. I mean, you can just picture somebody running, right? In this, there's this kind of hurriedness, again, amping up the tension, right? In this is not relax after work music, right? This is not what this is. And it is just, this rapid, just kind of edgy sound, very different. But again, this is not some experimental, jazz odyssey. This is very intricately constructed and put together to make sense in a way. And there's also some very good, I'm sure you can just, go to YouTube and search for frame by frame. There's some video of this being performed and watching Robert Fripp's fingers on the guitar as he's working this, this guitar piece here is just amazing. I mean, just incredible.
And, and I sat down, in preparation for this podcast, and I have listened to this music pretty consistently over the years. I haven't gone long stretches of time where I haven't, pulled out discipline to listen to it. But I sat down, my wife was somewhere for the evening, and it was just me, and I just sat down in the sweet spot in the family room with the surround equipment, and listened to the whole album, this side and the second side, and just to kind of marshal my thoughts and whatnot. And during this song, it's sort of like when you listen to the way that the different instruments are put together, and they're all kind of hanging separately in the sound. It's like, this is fucking weird. But this song, if like back in the day, you'd put this on, and people that weren't familiar with King Crimson, they didn't find it weird. The whole package kind of smooths things out, I mean, I don't want to just sort of rehash what we've already kind of discussed, but this song really coalesces. The instruments coalesce well, and it's also a regularly, I think, a very appealing vocal sound when the verses come. It doesn't sound. Adrian Belew doesn't sound as dorky as he sometimes does, and the lyrics are not really all that extensive. They're kind of spare and minimalistic, and the first verse is basically frame by frame, and then Tony Levin in the background is saying suddenly, and then death by drowning, and then Tony Levin, from within, in your arms, analysis. There it is. And then the second verse is step by step. Say, Tony, suddenly, down by numbers, from within, in your arms, and those are the entire lyrics of the song. Yeah, they repeat. Yeah. They repeat. Later on in the song, but that's it. Those are the lyrics.
It's I think that what's more significant than the volume of the lyrics is the way that they're done. There's really kind of a drawing at you, kind of a slowly pulling at you. They kind of, frame by. I mean, they're really pulling these words out. So there's a lot of feeling in the in the words, and when you put them together, it's, again, because there's just not a lot of words. It's hard to, like, okay, what are we getting at here? But I see within that this this notion of, if you think too much about anything, it's going to bum you out. It's just kind of like, the more that you get into something, the more that you look at like an individual frame and try to analyze it, the deeper you get into the details, it's a bummer. So, like be cautious about going too deep into anything. That's what I hear from this. And you certainly hear this emotion, like this particular person had gotten a little bit too deep into the analysis and decided maybe it's time to resurface from what's happened. Very interesting song. Very interesting.
Well, and I mean, and that's as good a good an assessment of the lyrical gist of the song as anything.
Yeah.
Because it's frame by frame. Because sort of film, one frame at a time. Death by drowning from within. So it's sort of like you're drowning in information. I mean, how many separate
detail? Yeah.
I mean, like what is this? What are like 16 frames a second or something that a film?
I think it's like 31 or
whatever
29
it is.
or
but
whatever.
I mean, there's more. So for every second that you're looking at a movie that's on film, that's X number of frames. And so if you start to break things down frame by frame, you're going to drown. You're going to drown in analysis. Now, when he's referring to "In Your Arms," is he referring to a romantic partner? And we don't need to get too deep in this, or what? Doesn't really matter. But interesting. And one of Adrian Belew's sort of more the ambiguity is a plus to these lyrics, and let's face it. If it's a situation where you're going to be putting on this album to listen to, it's not going to, people aren't, whoever, if it's you're by yourself or if you're with a group of people, listening closely to the lyrics of this song is not really part of it, because I think that it's the whole package, and including the manner in which the guitars interact with each other, that really distinguish this song, but very different in feel and tone to the first song, Elephant Talk. It's but sounds like the same band. And so I it's another strong, came out with a great opening track, and they followed up with something that I think that Elephant Talk is probably would probably be ranked by King Crimson aficionados as a superior track to this, but there'd be dissenters to that. Not that it's a contest or anything, but two, and let's kill the suspense. I think all four of the tracks on this side are of relative strength with each other.
I actually personally I prefer Frame by Frame to Elephant Talk. Just again, kind of. If we're forced at gunpoint to rank these things, but to your point, it really is. Yeah, there's a little bit different feel to it, but it's the same band that's playing these tracks, and so it's a consistent type of sound, but different songs that have different effects.
I would agree with you that Frame by Frame is a better example of progressive artistry. Mm-hmm. The music is a little more adventurous, and the lyrics are a little more arty. There's more art in the lyrics, but so Frame by Frame is track number 2, and as Mark and I apparently agree, it is a strong one. Moving right along to track number 3, which is one of the most beautiful songs I know of off the top of my head. This song is much slower. It's a much more conventionally arranged and written song than any of the others on this side. And the lyrics are, I think these are the strongest lyrics on the album. And this song is certainly, I think, accessible to a wider group of listeners than the other tracks. I mean, you could play this song for your grandmother and
I'd buy that. Yeah.
She'd probably like it, unless she didn't like music at all.
Yeah.
But it's called Mate Kudasai, which is Japanese, and it means, I believe it means, I will wait for you in Japanese.
Yeah, that or please wait. Either, kind of either way there. Yeah.
So I didn't look it up before, in prep for the podcast, but it's Japanese, and wait, it's longing wait.
Yeah.
But let's listen to the first couple of minutes of the song, and then we can continue after, so the listeners know what we're talking about.
Sounds good.
All right. Now, just the beginning of this track, it just sets such a tranquil tone.
Yeah. And
then when kind of the rest, when all of the instruments have finally come in, it's just you're floating in a comfortable canoe in a very placid pond, and nothing is bad or wrong. I mean, it's just such tranquil. This is a song to put on if you want to relax after work.
Oh, absolutely. And it just has a way, the music itself, before looking at the lyrics at all, the music itself, it gives you a feeling. And this is like you're in a hammock on a tropical beach. You are it takes you to this just kind of peaceful kind of place. And I'd absolutely agree with you. Yes. A perfect song for at the end of a long day when you just want to kind of calm down and relax. Not still when you're listening to all the different pieces and the music and stuff. It's complex, but it's peaceful, right? In kind of a peaceful type of way. And also, I'd agree that probably the most conventional song on the side, but just beautiful and just has a way of taking you away.
Well, and the imagery of the song is it's very simply presented in the lyrics. Mm-hmm. It's a woman, she who's sitting by the window, and she's in some kind of pain, and rain is falling, and waits in the air. She sleeps in a chair in her sad America, Mate Kudasai, and longing for her lover who's presumably in Japan, because she's in her sad America, and she's willing to wait, and she wants him to wait too. It's just it's very straightforward, but beautiful. And he doesn't sound like a dork in this song either. In terms of his singing, I think it's right, and it's well presented. He does a good job singing this song. He captures the emotions that the song is supposed to capture.
I also like the way that when you start hearing the lyrics, I think that the lyrics are very well done. Because as I said before, we both, I think, agreed, when you hear the beginning of the song, you're picturing this just peaceful, calm, cloud-like kind of place. But as you hear the lyrics, this element of sadness or loneliness starts to enter. I mean, sitting, looking out a window, a rainy pane. I mean, you can kind of picture a fall Sunday afternoon when that I've got to go to work tomorrow feeling starts to creep into your mind or whatever. But in this particular case, it's a longing or loneliness or missing someone who is far away, and you can feel that as the singing actually starts. Again, just very well done in the way that music should tug on different emotions in people, whether it's happiness and joy or whether it's loneliness and sadness or whatever. And this does a good job of that.
And the bass line is I think it's simple, but it's so compelling to me. And this is the only track on this side where Tony Levin plays the conventional bass guitar as opposed to the Chapman stick. And I don't know. I mean, I can't. This is probably my favorite song on the side.
I'd agree.
It's because it's just so. And when you're listening to King Crimson, you're looking for something. Or at least I'm looking for something that's a little bit off the beaten path, but this song just manages to succeed in a more conventional way, such that it's hard not to like this one. And I got to tell a brief story here. This would have been the summer, between first and second year in college. I was back in Appleton, living with mom and dad, working for United Van Lines during the summer. And a mutual friend of ours was back from college with one of his college friends that summer, and he was attending the University of Chicago, and we went out and hung out in Appleton together. And we were walking around Appleton, down by the river. We were like on the Lawrence University campus. We ended up hanging out at City Park in Appleton, and we were carrying around, among other things, a boom box and a jug, like a glass jug of Gallo wine. And it's not outside the realm of possibility that we had taken some hallucinogenic chemicals.
May have been possible.
And at one point, we were in City Park, and you know how they've got the kind of the diagonal sidewalks through City Park.
Yeah.
And it was a bench off to the side facing the sidewalk. And the three of us sat in this bench, and we put the boombox in the middle of the sidewalk. And we're sitting there for a little while, and this song played. And we were listening to cassettes. That was the cassette boombox, and and I'll tell you, that was just a beautiful moment. Sitting there, and like people would walk by, and they'd kind of look like, "What are these three goofballs doing?"
Yeah.
but I know no one gave us a bad time. We weren't giving anybody a bad time. They weren't giving us a bad time. But
they might have felt a little bit of the piece of the song.
Maybe, I guess we'll never know. But I'll tell you, so this is the summer of 1982.
Yeah.
And might have been the early fall, might have been like September or so.
Mm-hmm.
But I can still picture that moment like it was
it was yesterday.
Like it was 43 years ago. But so
Music will do that. Music will do that.
Mate Kudasai is a wonderful, wonderful song and one of the stronger tracks on the side. All right, we're going to move from what is arguably the most beautiful song on the side to what is probably the harshest song on the side. And I mentioned earlier that Robert Fripp had a way of playing guitar that could really just, cut metal.
Mm-hmm.
And Adrian Belew could get some downright nasty sounds out of his guitar.
Yeah.
And when you put the two of those guys together and said, "Hey, let's have us a blow," what you get is the fourth and final track on this side, which is called "Indiscipline." And rather than belabor the point, let's listen to a little bit, and then we will finish up after.
Okay.
I do remember one thing. It took hours and hours, and by the time I was done with it, I was so involved, I didn't know what to think. I carried it around with me for days and days, playing little games, like not looking at it for a whole day, and then looking at it to see if I still liked it. I did!
All right. If that day in Appleton and we'd been sitting in City Park and instead of Mate Kudasai playing, this had been playing, number one, it wouldn't have been as beautiful a moment. And number two, some of the people walking by might have just shaken their heads like, what the fuck, Yeah. What are you guys doing?
Yeah.
But Indiscipline. Now, just talking about the guitar, that, I challenge someone to play me something where just fierce, in your face, harsh, loud, chaotic electric guitar that has much edge. I challenge anyone to come up with something that tops this in terms of just
Yeah.
guitar ferocity.
And it can't just be, I mean, you could sit and just slam on the guitar through mega amplifiers and whatever, and get all, kind of a feedback and whatever. And okay, yes, and you can make something that's irritating, to listen to. But again, that's different. This is constructed music with people playing very in sync with each other. Yeah. With very intentionally and thoughtfully to create this type of sound. So just pulling up some just crazy guy trashing his instrument on stage, well, that might sound kind of weird, but that's not what we're talking about here. This is and I'd agree, you're going to have a hard time topping this one.
And I've seen them perform this song live. I saw this incarnation of King Crimson in 1984, and they played this song, and they can. It doesn't sound quite as clean live as this one does, but they can basically recreate that guitar sound. I don't know if they might have played it when we saw them in 1995.
Yes, I think they did.
But just a cuts like a knife guitar sound, and there's nobody that could really do it like King Crimson with that same edge. And so just instrumentally speaking, one of the more in your face compositions from this incarnation of the band, and very interesting, the vocal section there. Again, and it's talking, it's not singing. Yeah. It's different in structure and in delivery than the other three tracks on the side. And the just sort of the backstory of what he's talking about there, at the time, around the time that this was recorded, Adrian Belews, it was either his wife or his girlfriend, I'm not sure which, but his companion at the time, a woman that he was with, and may still be with, for all I know, was an artist and was working on a painting. And she was talking to him about how she was really immersed in this project and was very focused on this painting that she was doing. And started and was just talking, and Adrian Belew was like taking notes, and he sort of paraphrased what she had been telling him about this painting that she'd been working on into the words that are used in this song. And so I carried it around with me for days and days, and playing little games like not looking at it for a whole day and then looking at it to see if I still liked it. That his wife was talking about a painting that she'd been working on. And now, when you hear what he says in the song, in the track, it doesn't make any reference to a painting or some other project, like an artistic project, a sculpture or whatever. Yeah. But just this obsessiveness. Yeah. And do I have the, can I not look at it for a whole day and still like it? And then he answers.
He clearly, connected this with the creative process that he would go through in creating music. This artist's dilemma of, is this good or not? Let me come back and look at it again. Do I like it? Do I not like it? Will other people like it? It is kind of an interesting concept. For the most part, in listening to this song over years and years, I didn't really pay a whole lot of attention to the lyrics. There's a part in the center of the song where, they kind of go into this loop where it says, I repeat myself when under stress, I repeat myself when under stress. And that kind of sticks out in my mind. But the music is so, kind of edgy and aggressive that's always drawn my focus instead of looking at the lyrics. But, it seems to to make sense. He's talking with or his wife about what's happening, and I'm sure he sees that's the same thing I do. With I come back to it and I play it again. Do I like it? Do I not like it? I don't know. And it's stressful. Because you need to produce if you're going to be an artist, and for someone like Adrian Belew, he's got to create for King Crimson Robert Fripp of all people. So it is it's an interesting process that he could relate to, and you put that into a song where it's edgy, nervous, tense. These types of things. It probably is a little bit of a descriptor of the environment he was working in at the time.
Well, and the first two songs, Elephant Talk and Frame by Frame, you mentioned that there's a certain uncomfortableness that come when the music starts. It's like this. There's something mildly unsettling about this, and the uncomfortable feeling is Mate Kudasai. It's like, okay, we can take a fucking break and just have some tranquility and relaxation and beauty and longing and sort of normal song emotions. Mm-hmm. Well, you can throw that out the window here. And because it just when they decided they wanted to create something that was dissonant, they could. Well, they could throw down.
Well, we talked about this a little bit before we started taping here. As I'd said in listening to this in years previous, I hadn't focused a whole lot on the lyrics. And whenever we're going to sit down to do a show, I want to get the lyrics in front of me so I can just, go over them and see. And I'm reading this and listening to the, to the song and the music. And I pictured this is like the thoughts of, when Skynet becomes self-aware and AI now has its own intelligence, this might be what it would start saying. And I then, with that in mind, listen to this song with the edginess, and then my mind starts going in all these places about where AI is going to take us and how long it's going to take them to laser gun the whole world and leave us just smoldering in our tracks here. And I needed to think about something else for a while. But anyway, the lyrics work from that concept as well, even though they were written obviously back in some 45 years ago. So just put that in your pipe and smoke it.
I mentioned that Adrian Belew sort of copped the idea for these lyrics from something that his wife was telling him. Mm-hmm. But on the second side, there's a track where there's some spoken words by Adrian Belew. And there's something that was recorded when I don't think he knew he was being recorded, and it certainly wasn't something that was done with the intention that it would actually be used on one of the songs on the album. Mm-hmm. But I think this album was recorded in London, not New York City. I don't know that off the top of my head, but
I think it was.
But Adrian Belew had been walking around outside of the studio, and he encountered a couple of gang members who were, who started interacting with him, and then he ran into some police officers right afterwards. And in any case, he'd come back to the studio, and he was telling the people in the studio, the other band members and the engineers and whoever was there, about he'd ran into these people when he was out, and he was describing it. And at some point, Robert Fripp looked over at through the glass and hey, why don't you roll a tape here? Let's get this down. And so they used a lot of different sources for inspiration for the vocal content of their music at that time. But in any case, Indiscipline, a a unique and, in my opinion, very interesting track. And the closing track on this side, which, as I said earlier, is one of my favorite sides ever. Becoming a fan of King Crimson was really a big juncture in my sort of music, my evolution as a fan of music. Mm-hmm. And to this day, I continue to be a big King Crimson fan. And, people might be wondering, as I said at the beginning, that this is really about the most normal side of King Crimson music that I can think of. Now, for people that had never heard this stuff and they've heard some of the clips that we played from these songs, they might be thinking that I need to seek professional help. Well, and I guess one thing I guess my only response is, you should hear side 2.
Let's start with side 2, right?
Yeah. And I'll tell you, side 2, in just quality of music, there's 3 tracks that are a little longer. 2 of them are definitely a little longer than these, but in terms of just pure musical interest and whatnot, it stands up to this side. Yeah. But it takes it farther out into the quasar, if anything. And two of the tracks, there's this track I mentioned with the recorded spoken words of Adrian Belew. That's one of the tracks on side 2. The other 2 tracks are purely instrumental. Yeah. And but be all that as it may.
It's a great, a very interesting band. That and the music is very interesting to listen to. And I mean, I would agree with you. If you're gonna start to listen to this band, this is the album and this is the side to do it on. And it's 4 songs, a great side on a very interesting album by a very important band. So and a great conversation, Mike.
Yeah. So if you find this interesting, you're going to find other interesting material from King Crimson if you feel like you're up for it. All right. Well, Mark, we will talk to you next time.